Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Sales Technology Podcast. I'm so honored to have my next guest, the sales legend, Kristie K. Jones. How are you doing today?
Hey, David. Good morning. I'm great.
I'm so excited to dive in with you. You just released a book called Selling Your Way In, Setting Your Income, and Owning Your Life. Okay, I need to learn this. This is this is right up my alley. I love this. Tell me about this. How did you come up with the book, and what drove you to write it?
Yeah. I think there are a lot of great how-to books out there, and I think there are a lot of great authors doing that. And so I wanted to do something a little different. I think if you want to know how to prospect or negotiate or, do those kind of things, there are plenty of good books out there that'll teach you that. So I didn't want to put another one of those on the market. And I had been really seeing a lot of sales professionals, I think particularly in the last few years when, job layoffs have happened and those type of things, who have taken jobs that maybe didn't fit their specific swim lane or sales superpower. And so, we talk a lot about in the B2B SaaS space how that, fewer than 50% of people are hitting quota. And why is that? Why is that? And there are lots of reasons for that, and some of which I won't mention today. But I think one of the reasons is people aren't picking the right sales role for them in the right company, selling the right thing into the right industry with the right boss. And so if you don't really understand what your sales superpower is and where your swim lane should be, then you may end up just like selling the wrong product or service, or selling into the wrong industry, or selling enterprise when you would be better suited to sell into the mid-market. And so I think one of the reasons why sales professionals are struggling to hit quota and get to that ever lovely OTE that we keep promising them is, in some cases, I don't think they know themselves well enough to pick the right role and the right company and the right boss. So I set out to give them some idea about how to do that so that they could really own their income and then own their life.
Oh my gosh. Okay. That's really, really tough, right? Because you get into sales because you need the money.
Yeah.
Who doesn't, right? I mean, and so if you're trying to achieve a financial result, then and you need someone has a job and they want to hire you, then it's like you just take it. But what you're saying is we need to take a step back and really understand our superpower before moving forward and just taking whatever we can get.
Yeah, I mean, here's the difference between the top 10 percenters and the other 90. The top 10 percenters don't have to take any job because they're in demand. And in fact, they can be proactive about their career. And so, like here's some problems with the world as I see it today. One is, we only have one entry point as an entry level job into sales for the most part in the SaaS industry is SDR. And that's a hunter role. But there are a lot of other sales roles out there that are not hunter. They're farmer, they're gatherer, they're implementation specialists. There are lots of things under the sales umbrella that give you a base salary and some sort of a variable income. But we as an industry have pigeonholed everybody into this one position. And so I think a lot of times even that, right, is that we're doing people a disservice because all of a sudden they get into the SDR role and they're like, I hate this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you're a farmer or a gatherer, you would hate that. And then you're going to leave the sales profession without knowing that you really should have been an account manager or a CSM. But we don't have an entry level position for account managers or CSMs. They seem to just happen either organically because we failed at the SDR role and somebody saw that we should be in this other role and is willing to give us a chance within our own organization, or we went and gained experience somewhere and you have to get that first job under your belt. So, if we can change the reactivity of sometimes the career path, like you said, like I say it this way, a lot of times we have our current job because a recruiter called us and says, boy, do I got a deal for you, right? That's reactive. That's not being proactive with your sales career. Or David calls me and says, hey, Kristie, that place I left because I thought the grass was greener, it is really green over here. Like you should totally come over here and work with me again, right? But what's green for you may be brown for me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, we're making career decisions either A, because we're desperate, which I get that we have to pay our bills. But even within paying your bills, there are probably, if you take a job and you're going to be gone in 6 months for one reason or another, that didn't really benefit you. So you might as well be somewhat intentional and proactive about your job search and how you move up the career ladder, if you will, so that once you get to a certain place, you won't have to worry about that. Right. companies are always looking for good people who can drive revenue. And if you're one of those people and you can prove it, then you get to choose the companies that you work for instead of the other way around.
Oh, that's the best. That's the best case scenario. That would be amazing. And I think if someone's sitting out there and they're like, okay, maybe I'm in an SDR job right now, or I'm in between things, and I want to take a step back. Can they use the book to kind of plot that out and make a plan?
Yeah, the very first section, there are 3 sections in the book, and the very first section is you have to get to know yourself before you can get to know the prospect. And there's an accompanying workbook. So there are QR codes throughout the book where you can get the accompanying workbook. But I spend that whole first section helping you figure out what your sales superpower, your sales secret weapons are, and in hopes that we can get you into the right swim lane so that you'll at least know where within within the large sales umbrella that's out there at organizations where you should fit with, under the umbrella.
Okay. And what do they have to do? Like I envision them sitting on a couch somewhere with a like Sigmund Freud looking person. Do they have to do some exercises and really
Yep.
peel that out?
Yeah, I would recommend a glass of wine as well. That helps,
Okay.
helps
Loosen it
shake out
up.
the inhibitions, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I asked them a bunch of questions that they need to answer, which is, what things do you do that seem to come easy for you, but are hard for your coworkers? What have other people told you their strengths are? What do people come and ask you advice about? If you're unsure about these things, ask friends and family. Trust me, they will know what you're good at, what you don't. What do you love to do, right? A lot of times the things we're good at are because we love doing them, right? And so there's a bunch of questions in the book that I asked people to ask themselves. And then I asked them to sort of, drill down further. So, okay, then but again, do you want to sell a product or a service? What about how do you like to be rewarded? Right? I mean, like, again, within the sales world, 100% commission job to 100% base salary job. Do you want to be tied to a desk all day, or do you want to be working out of your car or traveling? Like I said, there's so many, like when you think about all of the variables, right? The filters that you could put in place to build your perfect situation. I don't know that people, I use an example I had from an employee who worked for me a long time ago. Her name was Beth. And Beth was great. Like she had the biggest personality, which really shone through over the phone. But she left my organization and went to work for a local TV station selling advertising. And she did even better because if Beth's personality is strong on the phone, wait till you meet her in person. Right. And all of those face-to-face interactions she had turned into dollar signs. And so, even though she was great at her job on the phone and she was on top, 1 or 2 sales rep every month for me, she did even better when she decided to sell. So we were selling a product, basically, we were selling software. Now she's selling more of a service, advertising. So she switched what she was selling. She switched how she was selling it. And it was a game changer for her. So, I just don't know that a lot of people think through those kind of things. And I had said to her, like, you do great at an outside sales job. I knew she would because I knew her personality was even bigger in person than it was over the phone. And people would just be drawn to her.
Yeah. And sometimes it'll take people 10, 20 years of just bumbling around to figure out what they're good at. And I'm sure that some people never do because they just don't have a sort of a framework.
That's right. Yeah. And that's my concern. Like I'm trying to shorten the amount of time it takes you to figure this out. Right.
Okay.
Like you said, you can go through 5 jobs and then go, oh my gosh, this is my swim lane. Or you can, sit down with the workbook, ask yourself some hard questions, ask your friends and family some hard questions, and then figure out, even though I think sometimes people know their strengths, they don't know how to leverage them in a way that helps them figure out, well, if I have these strengths, then the best way for me to leverage them is a mid-market product, not a service in the healthcare industry. Like there's so many variables in that, right? And so, I think a lot of times, even in the software world, we think, well, SaaS is SaaS, right? But maybe you do better with HR. I mean, the difference between selling into the HR department or the CFO, right? Or the finance department, even if healthcare is your industry and mid-market is your space, but would you be better selling into healthcare or HR, or the operations team? So, I mean, even thinking about those type of things, like who do I seem to have a better connection with? But I just don't think people are spending time thinking about that.
It's like there's no roadmap really for them at the beginning, and they're just sort of bumbling. And then on the flip side of that, if somebody comes to you and they're like, my job sucks, like I hate this, it's essentially, what do you do? What do you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to figure out why, right?
Mhm.
There's certainly, so, I always say, like, you can only control your own behavior. So you can only control your own situation, right? If
Yeah.
your product is half baked and it's 2 generations behind the competitor, I bet your job does suck, right? But you're not going to be able to fix that. Versus my job sucks because I didn't get proper training. Then my follow-up question is, well, what have you done for yourself? Right? I
Mhm.
mean, how many sales podcasts, how many sales books, how many sales YouTube channels, like there, LinkedIn Learning, Udemy, Sales Gravy. There are all kinds of places to go to improve your sales skills. So, the question really is, why does your job suck? Right? And
Right.
then which of those sucky things can you control and which of you can't? If your product is 2 generations behind the competitor and the roadmap doesn't look, hopeful, then you're probably at the wrong company, right? No matter how good your sales, like I said, like I can take an A player, but I can't fix broken product, is what I say. So if I've got an A player and a broken product, it doesn't matter. Broken product times, whatever still equals 0.
Mm,
So again, like being
so
honest with
tough.
yourself about where am I really at?
Yeah, and okay, so let's assume that the product is broken and they're starting to look around. Then they read this and go through some of the exercises. Now they have a roadmap. Then what should they do?
Well, you're going to treat your career just like you treat outbound prospecting, right? You're going to come up with your ICP, your ideal company profile, and
Uh,
then you're going to come up with your perfect persona, i.e. your next boss,
wow.
and you're going to start to go do, I mean, again, you're going to start to filter things, right? You're going to start to go into LinkedIn or Indeed or wherever, or your network, and you're going to start to filter your network and say, hey, I think I can be super successful under these circumstances, selling this type of product in this industry with this boss. And so then you start your outbound prospecting. I said, I'm still waiting for the day when someone out of the blue emails me a resume and says, hey, I saw you're consulting for this company. I also saw that they're not currently hiring, but we should talk anyway.
Mm,
Right? I mean, that's what we do when we outbound prospect.
mhm.
We think you have a problem that we might be able to solve. We're not sure if you're in the midst of wanting to solve it or not, but that's what discovery is all about.
Okay.
So why not use the same strategy we're using to fill the top of our prospecting funnel, our opportunity funnel? Why not use the same strategy that we've already been taught and you're using every day for our own career?
Okay. And I think of the modern, job seeking process is you just kind of scroll through all these listings and then you send a resume. And I don't know if people use resumes anymore. I'm dating
We still
myself,
ask them to
but
upload resumes, yes.
yeah, you send a resume and it just sort of goes into this black hole. You never hear back, or you
That's
might
right.
get an email in 3 months that says we didn't hire you. Well, duh. You never
Yeah.
call. So what you're saying is apply sales skills to this very targeted job hunt.
Yeah, I mean, connect with the VP of sales at the company, of your dream company, so to speak, through LinkedIn. Send them in. I mean, again, it's so easy to figure out people's email addresses, right? Most all email addresses, I said to people, if you don't know, it's either first initial last name at, first name dot last name at, or if they're really small, it's probably first name at. So it doesn't take you long to figure out someone's email address. Send them an email, right? Send them a customized email, whether or not they're hiring or not. Because even if they're not hiring now, maybe they have a budgetary freeze. When they do, you want them to be, you don't want them to post that job. You want them to call you first for that 30-minute phone screen, right? So, and again, in using your network, like, people say to me all the time, like, what do you do? And I have a very specific, elevator pitch, if you will. I work with B2B SaaS companies, mostly Series A funded, $0 to $5 million in revenue, who need to either build out or improve their sales processes.
Okay.
Now you know if you are my person or not my person. Like, are you my people or not my people? Right? So if you start telling your circle, I'm looking for this type of role in this type of industry with this type of company selling this type of product or service, then when people, see something, come across something, they're going to think of you because you've been so specific. It's super scary, David. When I first stopped being a sales trainer, and stopped calling myself a sales trainer on my LinkedIn profile. Like it was scary to say, I only work with basically early stage startups with 0 to 5 million in revenue who are maybe even transitioning from founder led selling into hiring their first sales rep, but need to, put a playbook together first. I was like, oh my gosh, like my world, like my TAM, right? My total addressable market just went to this little itty bitty, like, round the corner from my, my neighborhood bar. But now, like people, like when those kind of situations pop up, my name's the first person they think of, right? All my business is by referral because people know exactly what I do. And I stay in my swim lane. Like I understand my superpowers. I stay in my swim lane. And by the way, all of this takes one big thing: discipline.
Yeah, because what if they so you really narrowed it, and now you can qualify better because it's like if you're not in that range, then we can't. But what if somebody comes to you and they're like, "Hey, I want you to sales train my entire company." That's where the discipline comes in.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. One, I belong to some networking groups where I have other people that I can refer that business to, right?
Yeah.
There's certain things I just won't do. First off, I'm not even the best person to do it. Now, if it is something very specific and I feel like it fits my skill set, I will say to them, I'm happy to do this a one-time training, but I'm not your ongoing person, right? Like I don't work with public companies. I just don't. I don't. In fact, the reason I don't is because I don't enjoy it. Right. I love to work with the smaller companies, small and mid-sized companies, the companies that are in growth mode. But my network's big enough that, if I give you a lead and it pans out for you, I'm expecting a 10% referral bonus. Right. So I'm still benefiting, and then they're going to think of me, the company that I referred somebody else into who was a better fit than I was, will always be grateful. And I believe in the universe taking care of those who, do the right things. So I say, do the right things and the right things will happen. And so by passing that lead off to someone who's better qualified to do that and run that, and run a sales training for 250 sales reps, which is not what I do, then I think that will come back to me, tenfold.
So win-win. And so for the job seeker in this case, then it's I've got this narrow, qualification of the company based on my strengths. And if another public company that is dangling a lot of money and they want to talk to you, then you also have to be disciplined, right? And saying, okay, I know myself, and this isn't what I'm looking for, even though I need the money.
Yeah, I interviewed a candidate 2 or 3 weeks ago for an advertising job in the programmatic marketing space with a very small boutique company. And we had our phone screen. And then he said to me at the end, I thought it was, I mean, again, like I knew I was dealing with an A player when he said this to me. Hey, do you mind if I take 24 hours and think about whether or not I'm interested in moving forward in the process? I knew I had an A player because A, I hadn't told him I was interested in moving forward in the process. He'd made the assumption that I was interested in moving him forward in the process. And he was bold enough to, want to like process that. Right. And I said, sure. He's like, I'll reach out to you in the next 24 hours. In fairness, I thought that was blow off. I didn't expect to hear from him, but true to his word, the next day I got an email thanking me for my time, telling me he thinks this is a really good company, but he doesn't think it fits his skill set. And I was so proud of him. I replied back right away. And I said, first off, thank you for being a man of your word who walked your talk. I didn't truly expect to hear from you, but I did. And secondly, thanks for knowing yourself well enough to self-select out and understand that you probably couldn't be successful here.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. That is, that must be tough to stay disciplined like that. But if you really know yourself, then you know where you're going to be successful, and you can move into the A player range, versus.
Well, getting into a company you're going to fail is going to look bad. I mean, you can't do that too many times on your resume, right? Because then nobody will even call for the phone screen. And so, getting into a company where you can't be successful, I mean, sure, that's short-term income, right? So I always say, like, never make a long-term decision on a short-term emotion. And it's the same sort of concept here. So sure, you'll get 6 months worth of base salary, which is probably half of what you've been making, and not really what you need to survive. But then you're going to have to do this whole thing all over again.
Yeah.
Right. So now 6 months later, you're back to zero, and you've got a job on your resume that only lasted 6 months. And that's going to make it harder and harder and harder.
Oh my gosh, that's so tough. Okay, so now they've found their ideal job and they're in there and they're hitting the ground running from day one.
Yep.
Can they use this to move into the A player range?
Yeah. So sections 2 and 3 are going to be after we figure out this, where you should be, the swim lane part. So
Yeah.
section 2 is really now that you understand your superpower and your secret weapon and your swim lane, then section 2 is all about how to take the company's processes. So ideally, you're walking into a company that has some processes. So if you know yourself well enough, then you're going to be able to say, I interviewed a candidate yesterday who said, discovery is my superpower. I asked the superpower question in my interviews. He said, discovery is my superpower. And I said, great. How did you leverage that in the current sales process at your current company to make sure that you stood out, you got further down the sales cycle because of that, right? So then I say, you figured all this out. So then you got to go and take the process that the next company provides you, the sales cycle, how do we get leads, all that stuff, but play to your strengths, right? Now we're going to leverage those superpowers to make sure that you're going to have a leg up on everybody else. And then the third section of the book is all about what I call the mental side of sales, right? I said the work to get to the top doesn't actually happen at work. It actually happens outside of work. The personal and professional development time that you put in outside of 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, top 10 percenters understand that. And they're doing things a lot differently from a physical, spiritual, and mental perspective that are helping them get to and stay at the top. Sometimes your sales skills are all right, all right. And but what you're doing after work is counterintuitive to what you should be doing, right? You're
Mhm.
drinking too much, you're staying up too late, you're not exercising, you're not eating right, you're spending time with the wrong people, who aren't going to make you a better person. And so even if you have great sales skills and you can run that sales process, if you're not taking care of your mind, your body, and your spirit all the time, then how could you ever be at 100%? You can't because the body is your machine and the machine's broken.
Oh boy. Okay. Wow. Guilty as charged. Okay. So that's that's tough, and you're gonna
See,
burn
I know,
out.
I
You're
know, I
you're
know.
gonna
The
burn out.
therapy is hard, David. Therapy is
Okay.
hard.
Here we go. Let me get that couch here. But before that, I just want to pull on the say they get the job and they come in and they realize, uh-oh, there's no support, there's no
Yep,
processes, the
yep,
product sucks.
yep.
Then what do they do?
Yeah, I mean, you got to start the job search. I got myself in that situation. I had been the SaaS B2B girl for a while. I
Uh-huh.
lost my job. I wanted to work for another VC backed. I love the VC backed world. I was a VC backed junkie. And so I found a company in the CPG space selling holistic dog and cat food, which is not sexy, by the way. But it was VC backed, a really smart CEO and COO who had just come in and they'd just come from turning around Breyer's ice cream. So I was like, I knew that they were wicked smart. And I'm like, yep. And everybody I interviewed with was wicked smart. And, I knew the pace we were going to move at. So I was like, let's do it. And then I got in there and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a nightmare. I'd never been in CPG before, you know, we were running like ingredients, we had problems with, ingredients, and then we couldn't ship the product. And then the product was expiring. I mean, I was like, oh my gosh, food sucks. Right. And so 8 months in. So again, but because I knew myself, because I'd already done the exercises, I already knew who I was, I realized I'd made a terrible mistake. Right. I didn't think so because it checked a lot of my boxes. And I was like, how bad could CPG be, kind of thing? Like, I didn't know. I'd never been in a CPG company. But 8 months later, I was gone. Right. I mean, I started my search at the 3 month mark. I knew I had made a mistake. So like you're gonna make career mistakes. That's a blip on my, total. I mean, in the 35 plus years I've been working, like that's a blip for me, right?
Yeah.
That's an 8 month blip. But I realized I didn't wait 18 months to go, oh my, because by then, David, I would have been, this job sucks. I'm miserable. I hate my boss. I hate the company. I hate everything. But 3 months in, I had known myself well enough to know I made a mistake. And so I
Wow.
got out of there. It took me 4 or 5 months to get out of there, but I did.
Yeah. So you saved yourself a year of
Oh,
misery,
absolutely.
basically.
Yeah. I
And
mean, there's no reason to think it's going to get better. The parts I didn't like. So like, as you said, when we kicked off the podcast, like the parts I hated, like I hate my job, the parts I hated weren't going to change.
yeah.
Right? FDA approval for dog food wasn't going to change.
Yeah.
Running out of ingredients from time to time, not being able to source the right ingredient because it was holistic and natural, that wasn't going to change. Like the parts I didn't like about that like gave me anxiety, those weren't going to change. So I could change my behavior, but I couldn't change the problem. Like I said, if the product's broken, I can't fix broken product. In this case, I couldn't fix the problems with trying to get food to market.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So that's wisdom, right? In being able to look at it and go, I can change this, cannot change this.
Right.
Okay. Let's work on the stuff that I can change, which is I'm going to go get another job.
Right. I mean, I just started. And again, I knew, and at that point, I knew what I was going back to, right? I
Mhm.
needed, like, when was I happiest? B2B, SaaS, earlier stage startup, VC backed, so I went into my network and said, I've made a mistake. I need to get back into the world that I came from. This is exactly what I'm looking for. And sure enough, the universe provided.
Oh my gosh. Okay. All right. So now let's say someone's listening and they go, okay, I'm burning out here. I'm an A player. I'm making really good money, but all the things that you mentioned, check, 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 check.
Yep.
My lifestyle is not supporting this over the long term. What should they do?
Yeah, it's funny. I was just snooping around Reddit the other day and I saw this exact post, right? From someone who says, like, I don't even care about the money anymore, right? I am so burned out. And
Uh-uh.
so, I mean, you have a few choices there. One, some advice was, stick it out 5 more years, save as much as you can and retire at 50, right? Like, take that great salary and then be able to enjoy the second half of your life. But other people are like, hey, like, why don't you pull back, right? If you've saved well and you've done the right things financially, then you can probably pull back. But a lot of the advice was take a sabbatical, right? Just take 6 months off, regroup, reframe. But I don't think anybody, I mean, life is so short. If you're dreading getting up every morning, if you're not sleeping well because you're afraid the alarm's going to go off, and then you have to get up and go into a job that you hate, chances are, even though you're an A player today, you're going to be a C player soon,
Yeah.
right? Because your body and your mind are not in sync. And so your mind is saying this sucks, and your body's saying we got to go to work anyway. And so over time, you're going to either self-sabotage, you're going to, miss, like, you're going to drop a ball that you would have never dropped in the past when you were at the top of your game because you just don't care anymore. The minute you don't care and, you're dragging yourself to work, it is best to make a change. And again, I get that not everybody's got to pay the rent. You can't just drop a job on, on the day that you're not feeling up to it. But but the minute you start to feel that way, you have to make a change. You've got to make a plan, right? The first thing you can do is make a plan. Like, hey, I'm going to start putting my feelers out. I'm going to start talking to my network. I'm going to glossy up I'm going to brush up my resume. I'm going to make sure it's up to date. I'm going to make sure my LinkedIn profile looks as jazzy as it can. And so, like, there are lots of things that you can start to do that'll make you feel empowered. So that's the other thing. Like, that's a hopeless feeling, right? Like, feeling like dragging yourself to work every day, feeling like, there's no end in sight to this, even though you're like, I've got all the money, but I don't even enjoy spending it anymore, type thing. That's a hopeless feeling. So again, what can you control? Take control. Like, the best feeling is feeling like you have some power over the situation and taking, a proactive stance on that.
Yeah, and it's probably it's hard for someone to admit that. They maybe, I mean, maybe they need to talk to somebody who like can get them out of their head and be like, why am I burned out? Why am I so dropping those balls and my performance is slipping? Like, what's going on with me? And it turns out you've been pushing too hard for too long, and you're just fried.
Yeah, I mean, we're in that place right now, right? I mean, I'm hearing this a lot out, as I'm listening into conversations that are happening on social,
Uh-huh.
that, like, the CEOs, VC-backed companies, you know, venture capital companies putting pressure on the CEO. The CEO or founder is putting pressure on the VP of sales. The VP of sales is putting pressure on their top AEs, right? So, I mean, you think life sucks at the bottom. It also sucks sometimes at the top, right? Because if I've got another $120,000 I've got to bring in for Q3 that just ended, before I get my head on a platter, I'm not going to go to my D player, right? I'm constantly going to my A player. Hey, David, I just need a little more out of you this quarter. Hey, David, let's look your pipeline over and see where we can come up with another $75,000. Like,
Yeah.
you're the go-to, right? You've got, like, it looks like every day you're wearing your red cape, right? And, and that's exhausting too. But that's what's, if I'm a VP of sales and I'm getting the pressure pushed down on me, I'm not going to go to the person who's only at 65% of quota to try to get him to 100. I'm going to go to the guy who's at 92 and try to get him to 120. right? So I mean, there's like, so I mean, that pressure's there at the top too.
Yeah, and it's funny because my wife has this problem. She's so good at everything that she does that everybody keeps piling stuff
Right,
onto
right,
her.
right. The most
You
competent
know,
people get more
look
work.
for the busy person
Right.
that can that they because they get stuff done,
Right.
right?
Yeah. The get shit done people get more shit.
Yeah. And it seems like the VCs, you have this vision of them on a yacht somewhere with a
Right.
white sweater and they're just making mean phone calls
Right.
all day.
Right. With their golf, yeah,
But
golf, like teeing off from the front of the yacht.
right. And then
Right.
but I get what you're saying. They're under a lot of pressure. They have to produce 100x
Yep.
results or else
That's
they
right.
can't get any more
Yep.
money. And then
Yep.
they give it to the CEO who he thought that this was going to be fun and now it's not. And so they give it to the sales rep.
Right.
Oh boy, this is rough. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, again, I think, it is hard to walk away from certain situations for sure,
Mhm.
but your health isn't worth it, right? I mean, your mental health or your physical health, it's just, it's not worth it to be pushing yourself. And, to me, I talk a lot about boundary setting, right? And so the easiest time to set a boundary, by the way, is when you first walk in the door, right? If your boss never thinks you're going to work 55 hours a week, then they won't expect you to work 55 hours a week, right? I mean, if everybody needs to take those first 90 days when you get into a new job and put their best foot forward, and give 100%. But if you want to make sure you always have family time, that you're not interrupted at dinner when text messages are coming through or emails are coming through, then from the very get-go, then you don't respond to emails after 6:30. Right.
Mhm.
And if you set those boundaries, again, like you have to walk your talk, you have to say you're not going to do it, and then you have to not do it.
Yeah.
So like some of this, again, like this goes back to what can you control? We can only control our own behavior. And again, and part of that's interviewing. I think one of the things that frustrates me when I look out into the world and I talk to candidates and other sales professionals is a lot of companies are doing what I call shitty, they're doing shitty interviewing out there. It's not a two-way street, right? The companies do to some extent have the upper hand right now, but that's no excuse for not letting a candidate be an educated candidate, right? Meaning, they need to be able to ask as many questions as they want to ask through the interview process until they're comfortable, right? The only way you're going to be able to pick the right job, selling the right thing in the right industry with the right boss, the right company, is that you get a chance to ask all of the questions that would help you qualify them in or qualify them out. So you're basically like, you need it at some point during the interview process, you need to do your discovery as a candidate. And if a company isn't going to allow you to do that, then I would say you're probably sitting in the wrong seat at the wrong company interviewing.
Boy, it's crazy that I remember this is a long time ago, but interviewing SDRs and sales reps, and you would say, "Do you have any questions for me?" At the end, and they're like, "No, I'm good. I'm good." And
Right.
it's like,
Yeah. That to me is a red flag, right? Like that's not an eight, like right away, I know I'm not dealing with the top 10%er if they
okay,
don't have hard questions. Like, in my world, really hard questions sound like, how much runway do you have left?
oh,
How much of that VC money do you have left?
yeah,
What happens when you run out of that money? How involved is the VC? Right? I mean, like some really hard questions. And, the question I don't get enough that I should be getting all the time is, can I talk to someone on the team? you
mm,
know, and then
yeah,
I say to them, like, yeah, and you should be talking to someone who left the team too, by the way. Right. I
mhm,
mean, if you're treating this job search like prospecting, then you would also be going to, you would be also looking at LinkedIn and saying, who used to work here and left, and reaching out to them on LinkedIn and saying, hey, I'm thinking about, I'm in the middle of getting ready to interview with this company. Noticed that you were there for, 18 months, but you're no longer there. Would you mind speaking to me about your experience?
yeah.
Yeah. So like there's like pre-call planning, right? Just like we advocate in sales, you should be doing your pre-call planning before picking up the phone and calling a prospect. Why would you do anything different with your job search?
Yeah, and you've got those guardrails because you've got the qualification of what
Right.
you're looking for, so you really are clear on that, and then you got to put in the work.
That's right.
You
That's
can't
right.
just send resumes, hoping for the best and then not have any questions. You gotta
Oh,
really
no, no, no. No. Yeah.
look
I
at
mean, no, like that's not being right. Right.
them.
By the way, because we're in sales, how you interview is how we assume you're going to treat the prospect.
Mm,
So if you haven't looked me up on LinkedIn, right? I mean, I know who's going to my profile before the interview. If I see that you haven't bothered to look me up on LinkedIn, or you don't have any good hard questions for me, or you're even asking things like, what are the biggest objections that your team faces? Who is your ICP? Who are you going after? Who are you talking to? How again? I interviewed two candidates yesterday. They both asked me what percentage of your team is hitting quota. That you should be asking me that,
Yeah.
right? You should be asking me that. So yeah, I mean, like you should, if you're not treating your job search like you are outbound prospecting, then you're going to end up with stuff in your funnel that's not gonna close.
It's interesting. There was a little conversation online recently about founder mode. They called it founder mode. And you have to be a real nerd to know what I'm talking about. But it's all over, social media right now that the president of Starbucks went on and said, I don't work after 6 o'clock. And then next thing you know, he was fired and replaced with somebody who works 24/7. And then everybody was talking about founder mode. And I'm listening to what you're saying, and it's like, okay, so now we're back to everybody, burn out and, work 24 hours a day. It's got to be confusing for people.
It isn't, and again, there's a difference between quantity and quality. Like if you're working for a company that just wants the FaceTime and wants you to answer an email at 8 o'clock at night, you can do that, but you're probably doing it in front of an NBA game, right? With a beer or whatever, and you're not going to give a thoughtful response. So do we want that? Yeah, we're going to have to change executive leadership, sales leadership. The fact of the matter is there's always going to be pressure from Wall Street and from VCs and PEs to hit the number, right? That's not going to change. But if we start losing our best people who decide that they're going to go and be a personal trainer at the gym because they like that better and they can set their own right, they can set their own hours. Nobody calls them at 8 o'clock to talk about their biceps. We're going to lose people to other things, to other professions, or they're going to go out on their own, right? They're going to be a consultant. They're going to do something in the gig economy. They're going to be a freelancer. They're going to be a fractional fill in the blank. I talked to a guy yesterday that I had placed as an SDR leader about 18 months ago, lost his job recently, like in the last week. And he said, that consulting thing you're doing is looking pretty good. And I said, come on in, the water's warm. There's plenty of broken companies out there, who need help. Right. So we may lose him. He may never go back to being an SDR leader again. He had lukewarm experience or whatever. And he's like, yeah, what you're doing seems a lot nicer than what I've been doing. A lot more fun. And one of the main reasons he lost his job, by the way, which is a huge problem, is they just moved from a hybrid work situation to a 100% in office. And he had moved 2 hours away from the office. Oh. And so he was willing to come in. He was driving that drive 2 days a week, by the way, because his in-laws lived in that city. So he had a place to stay, but he'd moved 2 hours away from the office because he didn't think he needed to be in the office. And he was unwilling to make that drive 5 days a week. So he didn't get fired for performance. It didn't work out because all of a sudden the company said, now everybody's got to be back in office. And
okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And so by the way, as you saw in the last week or so, Amazon pulled that trigger. Right. And so there are going to be a lot of employees who are good employees. Right. So this is what I say, for no fault of their own, there are going to be a lot of A players on the market of no fault of their own. It's not performance related. It has to do with this back in work situation 5 days a week. So even if you're not hiring, you should be going to your CFO right now and saying, I need some flexible budget. If an A player comes on the market and I can get my hands on them right now, even though we're not actively hiring, I should get my hands on them.
Okay.
Right. So, I mean, the opposite is true, right? We're talking a lot about what the individual contributors should be doing to get the right job, but flip that over. The sales leader should always be in recruiting mode and should always have some amount of money available to them to pull the trigger for the right person, not just any person. But if that top 10%er shows up, they better find money for that. You don't want to say no to that.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm just thinking the SDR leader who bought a cabin somewhere in northern Montana because they thought that they could Starlink and work from there for the rest of their life. Now all of a sudden, sorry, you have to move.
Yep.
What a bummer. Yeah. Yeah.
No, I mean that's lots of people's lives, right? I mean, lots of people moved out of Silicon Valley, if you will, during the pandemic. Sure. I mean, a lot of people are in that position. Yeah. And I think I don't know. You can go. I'm on again, as someone who works from home most of the time and gets on a plane occasionally. And again, I think the downside, by the way, of working from home is I don't really turn off. Right. I do a lot of times sit there watching the NBA with my laptop on my lap and a glass of wine. and putting a proposal together.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I can also be at Orange Theory at the 3 o'clock class when nobody else is there and I don't have to fight for a spot. I'm willing to make that right. I'm willing to make that sacrifice. That's a choice for me. I'd rather be at 3 o'clock Orange Theory and work till 8 o'clock than go to 5:30 Orange Theory and be crammed in with 40 other of my closest friends sweating on each other. So, but I think that, if you're a sales leader, you better be on the hunt for A players, because they're going to be popping up just because bigger companies are changing that policy, that hybrid or that remote work policy. And you better be on the lookout.
You could scoop them up. What a great opportunity. Yeah. I mean, but you got to be ready. You can't rush in and.
Yeah. You're going to lose a good player if you have to go and spend 4 weeks convincing your CFO to give you the money to do so. Like, you got to have that verbal agreement with your, with your finance guy or girl saying, hey, like, I know this isn't in the budget, but if I can go scrape up an A player, we're going to need to find money somewhere.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So this is, there's so many things. I mean, the CFOs all of a sudden started showing up on all the calls about 18 months ago. And it's like, who are you? I've never talked to somebody like you before. They're tough customers there.
They are.
But let me ask you this. If this narrow group of people works with you, Kristie, what does that look like? I mean, it's almost like having this wise sage, on their shoulder who's, helping them to navigate through this process.
Yeah, I mean, my motto is I've got 30 minutes for everyone, and a lot of people take me up on that. I had a guy who bought the book recently and reached out to me about 3 weeks ago and said, hey, you said you got 30 minutes. I need it. He goes, I'm in a job quandary, right? Like, I'm not sure. I've got a couple of jobs I'm looking at. I don't know which one to take. Like, will you spend time with me? So we did. So I jumped on a 30-minute call and we did the pro con list and helped push him in what I think is the right direction for him. But I think I think this is what I really believe, David. I think everybody really knows when it's all quiet and you're alone in the house. I think everybody deep down really always knows what the next right thing to do is. But it's just the fear of failure, the fear of making the wrong decision. But but I'm here to tell you, like, there probably isn't any decision that you make that you can't undo. Right. I mean, I spent 8 months in CPG. 3 months in, I knew I was in the wrong place. 5 months to get out of that situation. I knew it was the wrong thing to do. It took me a little bit of time to get out of that situation, but it was undone. And that was so many years ago that I still talk about it as my career blip, my career, my step change mistake. But it never, ever, it hasn't impacted me, right? That one bad decision, and even if I'd made 2 bad decisions, right? Or 3 bad decisions, I don't think those were going to undo all the good things all the good decisions I made and all the good people I'd met and all the good jobs I'd had.
Mm-hmm. So move fast and break things.
That it goes back to the same again, flip that coin, hire, slow, fire fast.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, take your time finding the right job and then get the heck out of there if you made a mistake. And, you can't know everything about everything. Like, there's always going to be things that you walk into a job after you've taken it that you're like, ooh, I wish I'd asked that question. Right. Because you don't know what you don't know. If you don't know what you don't know about a particular company, product, service, boss, you don't know you were supposed to ask X. You didn't know you were supposed to ask, is there a chance in the future that we may go back into the office full time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. So, literally, Kristie, I'm holding up the book for the video people, but
thank you.
Literally, she has put this into a roadmap, a framework that you can use immediately. I think this is going to really, knock it out of the park with people. So if they want to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Sure. If you want to know where to get the book, go to sellingyourwayin.com and it'll list all of the locations. And again, most likely just wherever you normally buy books is where you'll be able to scrape it up. And then I would love for you to connect with me on LinkedIn and send me a note when you do so and tell me about the one thing that you took away from my conversation with David today.
Okay, that's a good question. Is anybody out there? Let's hear it, folks. So, Kristie, thanks so much for coming on, and I'm really excited to dive in. So, thanks you so much.
Thanks for having me. Have a good day.